of the City Council and the Petaluma Community Development Successor Agency for Monday, July 12th. Can we have the roll call, please?
Barrett.
Here.
Barnacle.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
McDonald.
Here.
Posake.
Here.
Let the record reflect Councilmember King will be absent from this meeting. All other members are present.
Thank you. And we will now have the Pledge of Allegiance. So, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will now have a moment of silence. Thank you. There are no agenda changes or deletions to the current agenda. So we will move now to general public comment. And I'll ask our city clerk if she has received any letters that are for general public comment.
Madam Mayor, we received 10 public comments prior to the meeting, which have been posted online with the agenda packet.
Thank you. And I will now ask our moderator to see if there's anybody in the public who would like to speak on items that are not on today's agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sharing my screen. Members of the public are already starting to raise their hand, but this is just a reminder that I'm going to start a 30-second timer, and we will see how many hands are raised by the end of that timer and allocate the time accordingly. So that timer is started now. General public comment, as the mayor mentioned, is for items that are not on the current agenda. So just a reminder to members of the public to raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in turn, or you can press *9 if you're participating by phone. Attendees will be muted when their time expires or when their comments have concluded, whichever comes first. Speakers are encouraged to be respectful. Threats of violence and obscenity are grounds for removal from the meeting. And I have 10 hands raised at this time, with the last speaker being Sonoma County Conservation Council. So we will reset that timer for 2 minutes and start off with John Hanania, followed by Wes. So John, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening. This is the same issue I've been talking about, the public record request, which is you guys have nothing but a major circus, and I wonder who's the circus ringmaster. On June 24th, I received an email asking for my address from the clerk, from Samantha, which is they have my address on file. So I sent my address. On July 6th, they send me an email saying, oh, it's going to cost this much. To me, somebody's playing a game. But from what I gather from all the documents that I've been asking for, which is I received some by email, but they're not all clear, Peggy Flynn lied. And I say it again, lied. When she said that the police department is safety issue, it's not a safety issue, the $500,000. It's complete remodel. It's not a safety. And I call on Brian Barnacle, who said he's going to hold the city leader accountable. So here's your time to shine, Brian. Any way you slice it, any way you look at it, any way you dice it, you flip it upside down, she lied. And the best way I can say it to you, as one of the city council member once said inside the city council chamber, you take a pig, you put a lipstick on the pig, it still be a pig. So flat out, she lied. So go ahead, Brian. Do your job like you said in your campaign. You want to hold people accountable? Hold her accountable for lying. If she lied about this, what else is she lying about? But your way is to cover up for employees. So we'll have to wait and see. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, John. Next speaker is West, followed by Chris JRN. West, if you can please state your name for the record, that would be helpful.
Hello, I was going to make a comment about the consent calendar. Is that after this general public comment?
Yes, please save those comments for consent calendar. This is for items that are not on the current agenda.
All right, then I will make my public comment then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker is Chris JRN, followed by Paloma. Chris, you may unmute and begin your
Thanks,
comments.
Patrick. Hi,
Shoot, I'm sorry. I accidentally unmuted you.
Hi, thanks,
There you go.
Patrick. Hi, council and staff. I'd like to make a comment on the council's recent meeting to appoint committee members. I note from that meeting that a number of committees received insufficient applications to fill all of the open spaces that were on the committees. On the other hand, for the recently appointed Race Relations AHCAC, the city chose to reach out to a number of community organizations with a deep interest in the subject matter that the committee was formed to address. That process gave us no shortage of qualified candidates. And without exception, the committee members that those community groups nominated have been excellent contributors to the process. They're well informed, they have great ideas, and they have a strong interest in improving our city's relationship with race. And the one questionable appointment was one of the few committee members who was appointed by the city's usual method, that is allowing open applications and having those candidates write in. While I don't think it's appropriate for this year's standing committees to be filled in the same way that the AHCAC was, I encourage council and staff to look at the quality of people that were nominated for the AHCAC by those interested community groups. And I strongly encourage you to consider expanding this recruitment approach to other committees next year. I think this would significantly increase the quality of participation on our committees. It could get us a lot more community engaged people starting to participate in civic service here when they might not have even thought about joining a committee before. And the city wouldn't have to struggle to fill committees using its existing application process, which has clearly been failing to do its job particularly well. So please, council, consider reaching out to community groups for recruitment for more committees next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Paloma Fotley, and followed by, I had on my list written down, I think Nicole C. raised and lowered their hand, so we'll follow Nicole C. So Paloma, you can unmute yourself and begin your comments.
All right, thanks so much, Patrick. Hi, I'm Paloma. You may know me from other public comments that I've made. This is an entirely positive public comment. The last time that I left a comment, I said, I wish y'all would agendize this so that I could leave positive public comments, and you did. So I'm leaving a comment to say that I really appreciate y'all extending the Slow Streets program. I think that it provides a lot of benefit to the community. And I know that it was brought in for the pandemic to sort of make streets safer and to slow down traffic. I think it's a really lovely addition. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for doing that. And then I also want to say thank you for agendizing item 3F in the consent calendar. I really appreciate being able to hear your thoughts on this and having a vote. So I just wanted to show my appreciation and thanks, and that's all I got for you.
Thank you, Paloma. Next speaker is Nicole C., followed by Ben Peters. It looks like Nicole actually put the hand down, so we'll go to Ben Peters, followed by Sue. Ben, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to follow up on the trestle because such a high priority. I noticed that it's really narrow there where the 24-hour fitness area. And so in looking at some of the parcel maps, it looks like that area is actually encroaching into the public right-of-way. And so recognizing that MKD Investments, Petaluma Great Mills, part of the limited partners that owns that building, is going through the bankruptcy proceedings with 24-hour fitness. It'd be a good time to notify the building owner that that area is encroaching in the public right of way, because that tight area, particularly when people are riding their bikes through, creates some problematic situations. And so we should do our best to get away from these private business owners. I'd also just like to comment on the subject of these commercial real estate groups as they operate in our city. They seem to be not following the water rationing requirements that the public has done such a good job on. And I really implore the city to have a little bit more teeth when it comes to outreach to these organizations. In particular, the property management groups that manage these, because the owners can afford to pay the penalties, but the property managers really need to be the ones to bear the responsibility for making sure the subcontractors that do landscaping actually conform to the public's water restrictions. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, Ben. Next speaker is Sue, followed by Taryn Obaid. Sue, if you could state your name for the record, that would be helpful.
Hi, my name is Sue Oakes, and good evening. So I'm speaking again on behalf of our houseless community members. First, I remember that there was to be a June 30th meeting with COTS and others to look at possibilities for an approved camp where folks could stay in their tents. And I would like to know what the results of that meeting were and how a citizen can stay apprised of the progress. Secondly, there was an email that was sent to all the council members that was sent to many cities about a self-managed approved camp in Martinez called Camp Hope. And there's a 12-minute video on their website that is very inspiring. And next, I think there needs to be education of the public about the houseless, and that anytime a location is considered to where to put a camp, there is upset and pushback from the neighbors. What I've found in visiting and speaking with some of the unhoused folks is that they are people too. There are many stories as to why they are in the position they are in, as there's as many stories as there are people. They are not all lazy, drug addicts, dirty, drunken, fill in the blank. Some have jobs, some do not use alcohol and drugs. Some are devastated by medical bills, loss of job, and eviction. So wherever we set up a camp, I propose a neighborhood meet and greet, maybe share a meal to get to know the folks who would be in the camp. And lastly, do we have any information yet from the hired consultant on the homeless? So thank you very much, and I look forward to some responses. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments and questions, Sue. Next speaker is Taryn Obaid, followed by Pepper Fernandez. Taryn, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. This is a thank you to our city council. I want to thank you for prioritizing a parks plan in the last meeting as a top priority for our city. I was so surprised and really happy at that, and I wanted to communicate that. Today I was walking along the Lynch Creek path, and I reached a stretch just west of McDowell, and it's just beautiful. Tall trees, blossoms, golden, birds that I haven't heard before. One particular call that I haven't heard in the 13 years I've lived here. And the feeling I had in my heart and the lightness of my soul was so pronounced. And I just was struck that, I submit that that's a qualitative metric that I'm so proud that our city council is prioritizing parks so that areas like that we can't quite manage to produce in our backyard will be around for all of us to appreciate and to benefit from. To me, that's a key part of our city, and I thank you. And then I did want to mention, if I may, that there's a rumor that some redwood trees are dying near the Kaiser off of Lakeville. They're redwood trees that are irrigated, but either a property management company that the city contracts to, or somehow one of our departments neglected to monitor that the irrigation was working, is the story that I heard. But I haven't gotten any more information on it. And I just wanted to ask if that can be investigated. Thank you.
Thank you, Taryn. Hernandez, followed by Sonoma County Conservation Council, and that will be our last speaker. Members of the public that were unable to get their comments in here, please send it to the email address on the screen, cityclerk@cityofpetaluma.org. So Pepper is next. Pepper, you may unmute and begin your comments.
All right, well, it's pretty hard to follow after that adorable Lynch Creek assessment. But I represent a coalition of residents that live along the D Street corridor, and we are hoping to put in front of the council as well as city staff the hope for quick build options and to lessen the public safety concern and lower the speed of people driving along our D Street corridor. I have specific requests within my email, as do other members of the coalition, and we're hoping that we will be able to bring that discussion up in front of you in future meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Pepper. Next speaker is Sonoma County Conservation Council. If you could please unmute and state your name for the record, that would be helpful.
Hi, this is Susan Kirks. It looks like I came through a portal that I sometimes use for Zoom meetings, Sonoma County Conservation Council, because two of the organizations I represent, Paula Lane Action Network based in Petaluma and Madrone Audubon Society, a countywide long-standing conservation organization with many members in Petaluma, are members of the council. So I often am using that portal for Zoom meetings. I just found Ms. Obaid's comment interesting and of course inspirational, but I'd like to ask her to take a drive out to Paula Lane and see what the city of Petaluma has done at the Paula Lane open space property. I was asked by many, many residents who have been going by, some in tears, some very upset about what the city of Petaluma has done at this conserved open space property. The city of Petaluma has graded and installed a roadway that is being called an ADA access trail along the entire frontage of Paula Lane. This has occurred in sensitive habitat, where the special status American badger has been in residence at this property for over 100 years. Up until June 16th, when the heavy equipment moved in, a juvenile badger was using that very area to forage and dig and try to obtain skills before it dispersed from its mother. The property is a natal territory where an adult female is in residence. The badger is a keystone species where other species mothers give birth and raise their young. It has to be a safe, unencroached upon area. The city of Petaluma has caused very serious damage to this. The plant biologist has stated to the Open Space District the term.
I'm sorry, Susan, your time has expired. And that was our last speaker, Madam Mayor, so back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we will close general public comment. And as our moderator said, if anyone did not get an opportunity to speak but would like to, please send us an email. So now we are going to go on to council comment, and I'll start with Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you very much. It's been a light week in outside council assignments. I do want to mention that the Petaluma Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee did meet. The highlight is that we are now kicking off the pedestrian and bicycle master plan, the long-awaited one, and that bodes really well for all things bicycle and pedestrian in Petaluma. I did want to note that Know Before You Grow, our local citizens group, has a meeting this week, this Wednesday, on transportation and Petaluma's general plan. So those are two items that are dovetailing together nicely. I hope the public can attend the Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Know Before You Grow webinar. And then just on a bit of a side note, I did hear today that PERS released their fiscal year rate of return for last year on all investments, and that certainly impacts Petaluma's budget, if not this year, but long term. The California pension system has a 21% rate of return in the last year, so that is good news long term. Thank you very much.
Over former Mayor Glass's role in keeping us apprised of exactly where our PERS requirements are. So thank you for that. And we'll go on to Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. So CalPERS is an interesting beast. We'll probably get our next report from them in about 1.5 years. It's dealing with CalPERS is like driving down the freeway full speed with your windshield blacked out and trying to figure out where you're going by looking in your rearview mirrors. That's just the nature of the thing. But thank you for the report, Mr. McDonald. The Airport Commission met on July 1, and I don't think there's anything I need to burden the council with on that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor Barnacle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have had no meetings since our last council meeting. I do have a couple of things to share. I've had a couple of conversations with some of the local businesses downtown who are wondering about the future of our free range program and the parklets and outdoor dining and things. And I think they said that their permits go into the fall, but they don't know what's coming after that. And so I would advocate that on an upcoming agenda item, we deal with that, because it does present quite a bit of uncertainty for them to not know what the what the future holds with this, what has become their new reality. So I think we should agendize that sooner rather than later, so they're not surprised if we're making any changes. And then the other one, I watched the Bike Ped Commission meeting as well, and the one of the topics was the Rainier, the removal of parking on Rainier, and the D Street Coalition spoke up there. And as you all know, I'm an advocate of the quick build projects, and one of the main attributes for quick build projects is having engaged community members who want to support it and champion it, give feedback on it, iterate and drive adoption. And we have that with the D Street Coalition. So I'd really encourage staff to work with that group, because we can have a success, and we'll have residents who are singing our praise because we made the street safer. In addition to advocating for the D Street Coalition, I want to share that there's on Petaluma Boulevard North, on both directions, and on Corona, the city cut the trees back on one side of Corona, but on the other side of Corona toward Petaluma Boulevard, there's giant bushes that are growing in the bike lanes. And I'm just worried people are going to get hurt if we don't start maintaining the bike lanes. People are living, the cars are going 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour on those streets, and we need to do something before someone gets hurt. And that's all from me.
Thank you. Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this afternoon, I did have a Sonoma County Transportation Authority Regional Climate Protection Agency meeting. There you go. And a few things I want to highlight. We did review a draft comprehensive transportation plan for 2050 as members of the SCTA. And then the RCPA, we actually appointed an ad hoc committee to look at funding for climate. And I'll be serving on that ad hoc. And then finally, there was a item to ban local gas stations and have the RCPA actually help the cities in that process. And that was a unanimous support. And so I think we'll see what Petaluma start snowballing throughout Sonoma County. And the only other thing I had was I did do a tour of the Advanced Energy Center with others and was quite impressed, and would offer that anyone interested in the future and the climate, go visit that Advanced Energy Center that's sponsored by the Sonoma Clean Power. And with that, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Posake. You're muted, Dennis.
I got it. We had a Climate Action Commission meeting last week where we elected new officers, and Ed Minster is the new Climate Action Commission chair, and Panama Bartholomew is the vice chair. We also had a continued discussion of I urge anyone who has an interest in this. It's just very difficult to cover much on this in a minute or two. So I just ask anyone who has an interest in more information on the Cool Cities Challenge to give me a call personally. And finally, I had heard from Elise Hempel that the SAFE program, our Cahoots-like program, is up and running, and I wondered if the city manager might be willing to say a word about that.
Okay. Is that the rest of your?
Yes, that's all I have.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So I do not have a report, so I will ask our city manager if she would like to respond to that.
Thank you. Yes, our SAFE program started up on Saturday. We've been training staff. We have 8 staff members. So two teams for each 12-hour shift. And we've got it's 9 p.m. to 9 a.m., 12 hours starting this last weekend. And folks are driving around in the van, and we will start a larger outreach as soon as this is kind of a soft launch. So just starting to get to know the community and working with our partners. They did respond to a few calls.
Thank you.
And could you let us know what SAFE stands for?
Yes.
Sorry.
Specialized assistance for everyone.
Yes.
Specialized assistance for everyone?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can.
I don't think I could have even imagined that.
I can't, and I couldn't remember it. If this is my time, is this my time for?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Our General Plan Advisory Committee meets this Thursday. The topic will be environmental justice, so we encourage folks to join. It's this Thursday at 6:30. And regarding the question about the parklets, it's already on staff's radar. The permits do go through the end of October, so staff has been working and trying to find a program that works for everyone. We do have folks that are concerned about parking, so we're trying to figure out how to balance that. But we recognize that it's going to take years for our restaurants to recover. So that is first and foremost on our priority list among the others. And that's it. That's it for my report.
Okay, thank you very much. And so with that, we will go to the approval of the minutes for June 7th. And do I have any questions or concerns about the minutes? Not seeing any, we will just accept them as submitted. And next we have approval of the proposed agenda for July 19th. And is there okay, Councilmember Fisher? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I'd like to move approval for the agenda for our next meeting on Monday next week.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Posake. Okay, and can we get a roll call vote on that?
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So now we're moving on to the consent calendar. And before we go to the consent calendar, I'd like to call on our city attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With respect to item 3F, I wanted to apologize to the council. There's a blank that ended up remaining. There's two blanks actually that ended up remaining in the final version of the reso that went into the package. And the number 27, which is the number of seats that would remain on the AHCAC if the council takes that action via that reso, should be inserted into those blanks. So I just wanted to flag that for the council in case there's a question.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. And I see Councilmember Healy has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to remove 3F from the consent calendar.
Okay, is there any other council member who would like to take off any other item from the consent calendar? Seeing no one raise their hand, I would like to deal with the rest of the consent calendar before we go to item 3F. So is there anybody who has any comment? Seeing no one with their hand up, I will ask our city clerk if she has received any emails on items on the consent calendar.
Madam Mayor, we received one public comment on item 3C on the consent calendar, which is posted with the agenda packet.
Thank you. And I will then ask our moderator to assist us, and we will see if there's any public comment on items on the consent calendar that are not 3F. We are pulling 3F, so we want to hear any comments on items that are not 3F. And then once we vote, we'll get back to item 3F. So would you see if anyone wants to speak on that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see one hand still up, so I'll share my screen. Members of the public wishing to speak on the consent calendar items minus 3F, please raise your hand and you'll be called on in turn. We currently have one hand, and that is Ben Peters. So Ben, you can unmute and begin your comments.
Yeah, thanks. I had a question about the sewer VACCON. So on Monday, October 5th, 2020, the city authorized nearly $60,000 to repair one of the motors on the older VACCON. And while it wasn't noted in the staff report, it looks like this is the same piece of equipment that's going to be scrapped for $13,000. So just want to highlight that. I don't know if I'm incorrect on that or if that was omitted from the staff report, but I do find that a bit problematic that as early as October, we would spend $60,000 for something that we're already scrapping. There's also plenty of other additional sewer vacs out there that maybe aren't from a bankrupt manufacturer. So I also thought that was kind of curious to maintain that. And the biggest point I'd like to make on this is that while the vacuuming and pressure functionality of the entire truck is obviously needed, they do make trailer-based, and so that would be a viable alternative if we are trying to have an all-electric fleet. We could have the VACCON equipment on a trailer, and we could eventually run that on the Ford F-150 Lightning or equivalent. Likely not going to happen based on this vote, but that's the type of alternative that I think we should be seeing in our staff reports. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, that's the last hand we have, right? So back to you, Madam Mayor.
Sorry, thank you very much, Patrick. And with that, we'll close public comment on items on the consent calendar 3A, B, C, D, and E. And I will bring it back to the council. Actually, Councilmember Healy, do you still have your hand up on your original item or on something else? Oh, no, okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Vice Mayor Barnacle, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting comment from Mr. Peters, and I was just wondering if staff considered the trailers and what the findings were on that.
I've got Gina Benedetti on, even though she's on vacation right now, but I think she can speak to it. Patrick, oh, Kent's there. Thanks, Kent.
Hi, so this is a different piece of equipment. The sewer vac is the one that was repaired. This is replacing the water vac, and it's a larger piece that the trailer option would not work. It's a larger component for the water operations. So we wasn't in. So
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I'll move the items.
Items A through
A through E.
Thank you. And Council Member McDonald.
And I'll second. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have motion by the Vice Mayor and a second by Council Member McDonald. And can we have a roll call vote, please?
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Kosake.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. And so with that, I will go back to Mr. Healy, who asked to pull item 3F.
Thank you. So do you want me to speak first, or do you want to do public comment first? It's your choice.
No, yes, I know. You can speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So if there existed a legally defensible rationale for removing Stefan Perez from the ad hoc committee on the basis of events prior to being appointed to the ad hoc, I would support doing so. But no such legally defensible rationale appears to exist. And so what we get instead is a too clever by half draft resolution proposing to remove Mr. Perez for no stated reason whatsoever. This is not fooling anybody. The only complaints we've received about Mr. Perez are over his social media posts. As far as I'm aware, they all predate his appointment to the ad hoc. There are no claims that Mr. Perez does not live in town or have a Petaluma zip code. There are no claims his participation as an ad hoc member has been disruptive or that he has failed to abide by its guiding principles. We all took an oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States, which includes the First Amendment. And sometimes the First Amendment requires government agencies, such as the City of Petaluma, to do things they are uncomfortable with and would prefer not to have to do. But that's pretty much what the First Amendment was intended to do. I'm not prepared to evade Mr. Perez's First Amendment rights by voting to remove him for no particular reason at all, when such a basis would be transparently pretextual. However, there is a teachable moment for us in this episode. Going forward, we should ask applicants for all city commissions and committees, both standing and ad hoc, about their social media history. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if anyone else, I see the Vice Mayor has his hand up. Okay, you need to take your hand down then. Thank you. Okay, so is there anyone else who wants to speak on this item before we open it up for public comment? Okay, so then I will ask our city clerk if she has received any public comment on this item.
Yes, Madam Mayor, we received 8 public comments prior to the meeting, which are posted with the agenda packet.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to open public comment on item 3F only. And I'd ask our moderator to please see if there's anyone who'd like to speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hands are already being raised, so I'm going to share my screen. Members of the public wishing to speak on 3F only, please raise your hand and you'll be called on in turn. We have a bunch of hands raised. First is Amber, followed by West. So Amber, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you. I'm going to speak to both the council and directly to Perez. My name is Amber Lucas, and I'm calling today to personally address both the council and Stefan Perez. I'm asking that Stefan speak up and do what is right and tell the truth. If the allegations made against him are true, and if he is indeed the owner of the Instagram account Cali Nationalist, I want him and the council to know that the account's poor, unfactual, and misappropriated use of community content has caused me and others deep hurt. That account has posted images of minors and children seeking to incite violence against members of our community. That account is blatantly racist. Social media accounts to Perez's name are also blatantly racist, praising mass murderers such as Elliot Rodgers and use of Nazi imagery. In March of this year, the account Cali Nationalist doxed me via Instagram when I attempted to report it for the theft and misappropriation of my content. As a result, I have received death threats both online and mailed directly to my home. I hold the Cali Nationalist account accountable for that. The fear and trauma of being unable to feel safe in the sanctity of my own home is a violence I would never wish or perpetuate on anyone. If the allegations against Stefan are not true, then I want both the council and him to know how deeply I empathize. Stefan and I do not agree on many points, and I know this. But the innocent should not suffer for things that they have not done. We and I care about my community's safety. And if Stefan has nothing to do with the Instagram account Cali Nationalist, why wouldn't he want to come forward and tell the truth? Now is his chance. He's had a chance to clear his name. Please do the right thing and tell us the truth now. And I encourage the council to do the right thing and remove him, for he is making our community unsafe. I yield my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is West, followed by Chris JRN. West, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hello, everybody. My name is Wes. I'm called here today, both by God and by my conscience, to once again speak the truth about Stefan Perez. Stefan Perez is something I have had the pleasure of getting to know personally. Sadly, however, there have been attempts to defame his character, which culminate in today's agenda. In section 3F, which I am aware is being addressed, but I would still like to read this public comment word for word. An inconspicuously worded item in the consent calendar not only terminates his position on the ad hoc committee for police oversight, but abolishes his seat entirely, lest the public remember that he used to be appointed to sit there. Stefan has done an excellent job so far on the committee, in part because he does not serve any groups of special interest. Every meeting he arrives, sits down as his chair, and discusses what he thinks is right, not what his boss or organization would profit from. He cares about Petaluma. This should be self-evident. Anyone who knows Mr. Perez would also know that these allegations against him are bogus, unfounded malarkey. Furthermore, why did this council decide to remove a seat as a mere consent calendar item? Surely something so important and controversial would have a discussion on this, right? This action clearly shows a lack of transparency in the council, and lack of transparency begets lack of trust. That this action displays for all to see that many members of this council are not serving the people of Petaluma as they promised, nor the Constitution as they have sworn an oath to, but rather organizations like Indivisible Petaluma that claim to fight racism, yet merely add more to the fire. Lastly, Indivisible Petaluma, you may not see it since I'm unable to enable my camera, but I'm putting large air quotes around the word indivisible, casting doubt on Mr. Perez's heritage is a tired and racist tactic that has been used throughout history to silence Indigenous voices. I call upon the members of the council to open this up from a consent calendar item to new business, so that they may explain why they are removing this man from a committee that he was justly appointed to. Thank you very much. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you for your comments, West. Next speaker is Chris JRN, followed by Stefan Perez. Chris, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you, Patrick. My name is Christopher Neugebauer. I am rising to speak in support of the proposed resolution to remove Stefan Perez from the Race Relations Ad Hoc Community Advisory Committee. I want to point out that the Community Advisory Committee exists to address a power imbalance that exists between marginalized people in society and law enforcement. And the conduct of Mr. Perez in the meetings so far have demonstrated that he's been somebody who is unapologetically pro-police, and his presence on the committee is not helping balance this power imbalance that exists within our society. With that in mind, I believe that this resolution will help fix the problem at hand, and I believe that this action will make it easier and safer for Community Advisory Committee members to express themselves during meetings, which is something that I think will help the city in the long run. I'd like to raise that I'm also somewhat disappointed that this resolution uses sole discretion as its mechanism for removing Mr. Perez, insofar as it does not spell out the sorts of behaviors that the city believes would be unacceptable for members of this committee, and I believe will prevent the city from learning from this lesson in the future unless it takes extra care. Thank you. I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you for your comments, Chris. Next speaker is Stefan Perez, followed by Brooke. Stefan, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening, City Council. I understand that the City Council would rather I resigned my seat and swept this under the rug, and I apologize for not allowing you to take the easy way out. But I honestly don't think that this is what is best for Petaluma. It would be easier for me to resign, and I was really close to it. I could just go quietly and just avoid having all this, but I didn't join this committee for myself. I joined representation, and I don't just mean ethnic representation. I'm talking about diversity of thought. So groups on this committee say that they represent people that look like me, and they say that they know what I think and feel. And I'm here to tell you that people of color are not a monolith, and no group can speak for all of us. And that is the real reason why they want me gone. So I'm a person of color that says you do not speak for me, and that is dangerous to their credibility. So it's a bit ironic that they've ordered the all-white city council to remove the only indigenous member of the ad hoc committee, a committee with the goal of improving race relations and diversity. It's a little funny, I think. And doing this with no explanation to the public other than that is at the sole discretion of the city, meaning we do what we want, so shut up and sit down. So, why would you go along with this? And I think it's because I hold very little value to the city council. Not only am I the only indigenous person on this committee, but I am also the only committee member not associated with a special interest group. So carrying out political favors by getting rid of their rivals is no risk to you. I understand that. And especially considering that 4 of you are up for re-election next year. So I understand this is not about me. It's about all of us in Petaluma that want to have a say, but are told that you are not part of a special interest group. And if you can't get us votes, then you don't have a place here. So in my statement, I said to the other committee members the other day, I told them I will not be resigning because dissolving the seat, I believe, will set a precedence for how to get rid of political rivals in the future. Not just on this committee, but every future committee that you seek to create. And I've warned you about this, and I've warned you that there's other people that are going to be on their list after me. And I can give you the names and also the order that they're going to go in. So I want you to ask yourself if this is what is best for Petaluma to set this kind of precedent, or is this best for your political career? And that's why I'm glad that it has been removed so that people can hear you vote for it with your chest out and not hide behind the consent calendar. So show us that you stand for something, because if you stand for nothing, then you'll fall for anything. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Brooke, followed by Sarah. Brooke, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I just want to speak about how dismayed I am at the council's decision to remove the only Indigenous voice on the AHCAC. The board was notified months ago of documentation with several sitting members of the city council were notified with documentation of several sitting members on the AHCAC to with their intent to have Perez removed even before the first meeting began. Specifically, I know that City Mayor Teresa Barrett was notified of this information and provided documentation. And additionally, despite this knowledge, the board is moving forward with this action. And I find that using this kind of mode to dissent a political voice that doesn't necessarily resound with the group is a dangerous precedent. Besides the fact that you guys are violating Mr. Perez's First Amendment right just by taking this action, hiding behind a consent calendar item and not standing behind what you say you believe is kind of unconscionable as political representatives for this community. This is a diverse community with diverse thought and diverse beliefs, and not having only one tone to the ad hoc committee it doesn't help in the community, and it's not representative of the community as a whole. Additionally, you have multiple members on that committee, some that don't live in this community, that are making decisions for a city that they have no long-term vested interest in because they don't live here. You have many members that are continuing to dox Mr. Perez online. None of the information that there's been no information presented as to why Mr. Perez is being put up to be removed from this committee. And to the point of members of the Indivisible Petaluma group have continued to publicly in comments on Facebook pages, including the Press Democrat, back him into a corner to show proof of his native heritage, which is unconscionable. And these are the rumors that are being spread around about Mr. Perez at the hands of Indivisible Petaluma and the representatives there. And even after the moderator of the committee sent a letter out asking people not to participate in the online spamming of each other, the leader of Indivisible Petaluma, or one of the admins, Zara Garcia, continued to do that through Twitter and all of their social media pages. I think you should abolish
I'm sorry, I had to meet you there, Brooke. Your time had expired. Next speaker is Sarah, followed by Paloma Fotley. Sarah, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Well, I really want to know who wrote this sitcom, because tonight has already been ridiculous. So I support the council's action to remove Stefan Perez from the Race Relations Ad Hoc Committee. He really should not have been put there in the first place. He didn't align with the actual goals of the ad hoc committee. It's not there for a round table for everybody to voice their opinion. It's a committee with a goal of addressing race relations in Petaluma. There isn't a place for, the way that we're talking about the First Amendment is not actually what the First Amendment is, to my understanding, right? Like, if you get suspended on Facebook, they aren't taking away your First Amendment rights. That isn't how it works. You can't be silenced completely, but you don't get a right to every platform. If you submit a letter to the editor, they don't have to publish it. So removing Stefan Perez addresses what has happened. It allows that ad hoc committee to move forward and function and actually work toward its goals. It'll allow ad hoc committee members to feel safe in the space and able to speak to the things that need to be talked about, rather than just having an opposing voice there to muck up the gears and make things run the way they currently are. So, I mean, this is already a problem where the ad hoc committee is not able to do its job because we're caught up in this. yeah, and I'm just like, I'm just also just really disappointed that the resolution doesn't actually address why he's getting removed. Because you don't have a right to speak every place you want to. That's not how the First Amendment works. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you for your comments, Sarah. Next speaker is Paloma, followed by Blake Hooper. Paloma, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hi, thank you, Council. I have so many thoughts. Okay, so I just want to say there's been like a couple weird sort of allusions to the idea that this motion is in some way illegal. And I just want to say that, like, if this were illegal, Danley would probably want to say something about that. Like, you have a city attorney here, so if this is illegal, Danley, please speak up. I would also like to say that Perez, you are not being silenced. You have been very open about your thoughts and opinions, and people have heard them, but that doesn't mean that you can't have consequences for your actions. The political speech that you have put out there, a lot of citizens have said that they really don't want to, that political speech doesn't speak to their ideals, and this is meant to represent the community and speak directly to race relations. So there's that. I'd also like to say that the police are already at this meeting, so their voice is already represented. We don't need more people supporting the police, like, unabashedly sitting in on this. It's meant to address where the police could improve. And so somebody who's just thinking that they're doing, what they're doing already is great and they don't need to change, you're not really providing anything of value. And I would say that I've been watching and your contributions haven't been useful or valuable in any way. And I would say to all of the council, dissolving a seat for a member that wasn't brought forward through that designated process, it actually sets a really useful precedent that appointed citizens who don't go through that process aren't qualified. You would talk to a lot of local groups and said, who do you want to represent you? And they gave you their best. They gave you the people they thought would address this for their specific groups. And they trusted those people to support them. And so saying, hey, this person who was not appointed by any group actually isn't qualified, wasn't vetted properly, and should have gone through that normal process. I see nothing wrong with that. But I will agree with Perez and say that we do need more Native voices. So I would ask that in the future, the council speaks with the local tribes and asks them to recommend somebody to appoint their interests. So very much appreciate the group making this decision. I support the council's action, and I really hope that this and get back to the work that we need to do, because that group is kicking ass and coming up with really great ideas. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments, Paloma. Next speaker is Blake Hooper, followed by Sierra Downey. Blake, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Good evening, staff and council members. I'm calling to support the proposed action as well. As has been noted, ACAC exists to address a power imbalance between both marginalized people in our community and law enforcement. There is frankly no place on ACAC for people who unapologetically reject that premise and seem to be hell-bent on working against it. And this isn't a question about First Amendment rights. In fact, Mr. Perez seems to have been able to speak twice tonight, both as himself and Wes. This is a question of whether or not this Community Advisory Committee will have the proper resources and protections necessary to achieve its goals. The longer he remains on this committee, the more likely it is that the work of this committee will get bogged down in discussions just like this, rather than the mountain of work still waiting for them in the remaining meetings. And I was originally going to comment that the way the resolution has been written was a little disappointing because it didn't comment specifically on the behaviors that were calling for this. But now, given some of the comments that have been made and the way that this was removed off of the consent calendar, I'm actually grateful. Thank you for creating a resolution that really gives this committee and other committees like this a pathway forward to be able to remove members when they're really working actively against the mission statement for which they were appointed. Thank you, and I give up the remainder of my time.
Thank you for your comments, Blake. Next speaker is Sierra Downey, followed by Eric Leland. Sierra, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hello there. Good evening, City Council. Thank you so much again for giving us this
this time to speak. I, along with a lot of folks who have spoken tonight, would like to urge you to vote in support of proposed resolution 3F. This person's presence on this committee just does not support the mission of this body of Petalumans. This body was put together to address race relations in our city, but his actions and his words just do not take us closer to a collaborative, liberated future. He does not seem to add to building a just and safe future for everyone in our community with his seat. And indeed, his presence on this committee, it really sounds like it inhibits that work. So I think this resolution 3F will help the committee's ability to fulfill its mission, and it'll help our community's healing process. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Sierra. Next speaker is Eric Leland, followed by Sonoma County Conservation Council. Eric, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to just state my support for the resolution item 3F. I'm a member of the AHCAC. I'm the other special interest group member, not only one, there's more. I wanted to speak a bit to what Mr. Healy spoke about, gave support for preserving the seat and Stefan Perez in this position, and then ended that by saying, I think it would be a good idea to, review social media in the future, which implies to me that it does matter what someone's social media behavior is when they're appointed to council, to committees, commissions, volunteer groups such as this. Because if it were to matter in the future, I would presume it matters now. I think it matters. I wanted to thank the public, especially for speaking up, because it mattered to the public as well what this social media behavior was from Mr. Perez. It's important that we've been able to hear that support. I think folks on the HCAC have recognized and heard that. I wanted to thank the council for taking this action, making it an agenda item. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Eric. Next speaker is Sonoma County Conservation Council, followed by Will Soper. You may unmute and begin your comments, Susan.
I would identify myself after the Sonoma County Conservation Council name was given, so I will do that now. Susan Kirk's here, and I'm glad to follow Mr. Leland's comment, because what I would like to say is, as a member of the public, I've been able to attend the committees, the ad hoc committees meetings, and already structurally, some members do not feel supported and may not feel safe with the structure of some of the city staff or city management, city attorney who are sitting in on the meetings. And I think as leaders, elected officials, if I were in your position, and if I am in the future, it's very important to consider the context and the atmosphere of the committee that you have created. And it is very important to go above and beyond what you might feel is normal to facilitate an atmosphere of feeling safe for all members of the committee so that they are comfortable in participating. If what I have heard and read about the social media information and other information is accurate, Mr. Perez is an individual who actually does not represent what the goals of the committee are. And this really isn't about a First Amendment issue. It's about a larger issue of the committee you've created and the members feeling safe who are representing the goals of the committee. And I lastly would like to say, I think the way this was brought to the council as a consent calendar item is it really doesn't represent the best of a city and a community. There are specific issues that have been raised, and this is why the people on the committee feel unsafe and also feel that Mr. Perez may not serve best on this committee. He may serve on some other committee in the community or otherwise, but it seems like a backdoor approach to being transparent, to being accountable, and to showing leadership with what is best for the community and for the members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Will Soper, followed by Zyra. Will, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Mr. Healy, I want to thank you for bringing this item off of the consent calendar and opening this up for some separate discussion, which I do believe is important. I have been corresponding with Mayor Barrett, Ms. Flynn, and Mr. Daly since the last city council meeting. And I would hope that we pause on the removal of one person from this committee tonight and really take a look at the makeup of the entire committee. This committee has been wrought with infighting and inappropriate conduct by other committee members since the beginning, including infighting and accusations. It's almost like a standoff type committee at the moment to gain control over what is perceived by different factions of the community as to be important. And I think it's interesting that this item was stuck on the consent calendar, not as a separate discussion item. And I do believe that it's a result of perhaps some fear by certain city council members to not want to have an open discussion about the issues with this committee. Specifically, issues of non-residency. Zyra Garcia is not a resident of Petaluma. She's in fact a resident of Oakland. And she has attacked other committee members, both openly in social media and privately in discussion, making accusations of sexual predatory behavior by a committee member who's currently seated and not charged with dismissal. I think we have all witnessed the need to protect members of the community from inappropriate sexual misconduct as well. Ms. Barrett and Ms. Flynn and Mr. Danley are aware of this and have not addressed it and allowed this item to continue as is. I believe that it's inappropriate and that the best thing we could do at the moment would be to pause and address all of the issues with seats on this committee. Thank you very much for allowing me to comment, and I will yield the rest of my time.
Thank you for your comments, Will. Next speaker is Zyra, followed by Ellen O. Zyra, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hey, thanks, Patrick. So I just want to ask, if you don't want us talking about structures and systems, if you don't want us talking about racism and power, if you don't want us protesting inequality, if you don't want our country or Petaluma to change, then what is it that Brooke, Stephen Perez, and Will Soper would like for us and me to do? The reason why because I too have been verbally harassed. Conspiracy theories have been spewed on me that when the vaccination came out, I skipped the line. How do you think, as a woman of color, feel when you have people like Will Soper, Brooke, and Stephen Perez throw conspiracy theories that I skipped the line on a vaccination when I am vice president of North Bay Organizing Project? My safety has been a concern since July of 2019. Do you really think I want to disclose where I live? Stephen Perez needs to be removed, and I applaud Amber Lucas for coming forth to tonight's meeting and being courageous in telling the truth. Again, if these were false accusations, Stephen Perez has the opportunity to do so. Council was warned about him because he doxed me in a conservative Make America Great Again, because all I simply want for Petaluma is police oversight in order for other BIPOC folks to feel safe to walk the streets of Petaluma. It's great that Mr. Perez has a great experience doing so. What we're working towards is making sure that that experience that he experiences is for all. That is what I'm working towards. And I will have to agree. I agree with all the other, I'm going to call them harassers. You have to draw the line, City Council. You are up for re-election. And the consent calendar was a cowardly move. You refuse to have the hard conversations. You refuse to dismantle white supremacy. And you have no clue on how to protect Black, Indigenous people of color who have been murdered or unjustly had bad experiences with police. All I'm simply and all the ad hoc is trying to do is make sure that our experiences in our lives are valued. We want the best customer service from Petaluma Police Department.
Thank you for your comments, Ira. Next speaker is Ellen O, followed by Rigel Boone. Ellen, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hi there. So government workers don't have a due process right to keep their volunteer position. It's just not that way. Mr. Perez would have a First Amendment right to stay on the committee if he was saying something that was important for the public to hear. And that was the reason he was being dismissed. Mr. Perez's attorney said about his social media posts that it was filled with jokes. Well, it's not a joke how Mr. Perez chooses to engage on social media and how he is causing people of color, BIPOCs in the community to feel unsafe. His words are making people feel unsafe. The point of the ad hoc community advisory committee on racial relations and community and policing policies is so people of color, BIPOCs in Petaluma feel safe. This is a crazy conversation. Please, I don't care how you do it tonight through this means, any which way. This is ridiculous. He needs to be off the committee. Please do it now. Make the committee work. We need to have the committee work. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you for your comments, Ellen. Next speaker is Rigel Bowen, followed by Josh Simmons. Rigel, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hi, my name is Rigel. I'm a lifelong Sonoma County resident. And I just wanted to say, I've heard the word First Amendment or the phrase First Amendment thrown around a lot tonight. And I don't know if anybody listening has heard the phrase that your freedom to swing your arm ends when your fist hits my face. And that is 100% the line that Mr. Perez crossed when he went undercover, when he illegally recorded people, when he decided to use those illegal recordings and leverage his heritage to bolster Nazi cred online and then in the mainstream media. It takes a 2-minute Google search to find this man on Gab. And yes, Mr. Perez, all your info is out there in the Gab breach. It's really easy to find. You didn't cover it up. And it's not going to take longer than another couple of minutes for me to connect Perez in his personal circle. And you better believe we're going to be making those connections because all of these people need to be made public. I'm just so furious about this. Like, remove this man from his committee immediately. There's no reason that he should be there, and there's no reason that we should be having this talk. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Josh Simmons, followed by Elizabeth Escalante. Josh, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you, Patrick. Hello, City Council, City staff, fellow members of the public. The Ad Hoc Community Advisory Committee, like other committees, has a specific goal, and members who fail by non-attendance or other means, like acting completely contrary to that committee's goals, have no right to their seat. I don't love anything about this process, and I'm willing to bet that that may be the one thing that everybody tuned in tonight shares. But tonight is a necessary conclusion that will allow us to protect the work of this committee, to signal that gamesmanship and bad faith civic engagement have no place here, to signal that we care about getting the work done and keeping our commitments, to signal that we will not tolerate attacks on community members who are just trying to serve the community through the committees they've been appointed to. I can't believe some of the veiled threats that have been made. I want to make it clear to the members of council that the community has your back in approving item 3F. Please do this so that we can all move on. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Josh. Next speaker is Elizabeth Escalante. Elizabeth, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to have this time to speak. I am also putting in my comment in support of item 3F and for the immediate removal of Stefan Perez. And as everyone else has said, as well, like I'm completely astounded that this has gone on for so long, and it has taken about this much time with community members as well as members of the ad hoc committee to repeat over and over that they do not feel safe with this individual. And there is that amounting evidence as to why they don't. And what I will hope to see is for the ad hoc to continue to do the amazing work that they are doing. I'm very frustrated for them, especially with the passion and the commitment that they have for Petaluma. And if we can't do this one thing for them to continue to do the good work, I'm concerned about how we can actually make any kind of progress in terms of racial relations in our Petaluma Police Department. So please highly consider this tonight. We need to see results. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Elizabeth. And Madam Mayor, that is the last hand we have raised, so I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you.
We had one hand just go up. It's Mr. John Hania. John, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Well, this is very interesting. I'd like to make a comment about what Mike Healy said about the First Amendment. Mike Healy seemed to be wishy-washy, and he seemed to remember what the law is whenever it suits him and whenever he have a passion about an issue. But let me just remind you, what's the definition of democracy? And also, just let me point out to you, Liz Cheney, she exercised her First Amendment, but yet she was voted out because the process is democracy. And maybe perhaps Mike Healy need to go back to principles and learn about fact and fiction and principles. You know, everybody, the majority of people who spoke tonight want this person removed. But here's my theory. I think he's there to sabotage the process because the city and the police department do not wish to have civilian oversight committee, okay? And after the stunt that they pulled at the last meeting, where they were committee out of their process, which is one speaker have called Tracy Whip on it, that she is getting paid by the city. But let's not get sidetracked from the important issue, democracy. How many people have joined this meeting about this topic that they want this person removed? I'll go back to Mike Healy. If Mike Healy had several employees and he had a very productive company and with several employees, and he had one employee making everybody miserable, would he keep him? I think that would be very, very bad business practice. But it's when you run in a circus and you seem to be wishy-washy, you know, I like to remind Mike Healy again about what he said, I think like 3 meetings ago, Walk the walk, don't do the talk. Go back to principle, Mike Healy. Good night.
Thank you for those comments. And now, Madam Mayor, that's the last hand raised, so I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Patrick. And with that, we'll close public comment on item 3F, and we will bring it back to the council. And I see that our city attorney has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I may, I'd like to address some of the comments we've heard. I'll be brief, as brief as I can. In terms of this item, staff, it's our duty to implement the City Council's direction regarding the AHCAC process, the meetings of the AHCAC, and support for the AHCAC. Because that's our duty, we'll continue to carry it out. With respect to this item, and with due respect for Councilmember Healy, I believe there is a legally defensible rationale for the action. I believe it's addressed in the resolution itself. It's certainly true that as the local government of the city of Petaluma, as the municipal corporation, we are all sworn officers with a duty to uphold the law, including the U.S. and the California constitutions, including the free speech and other rights that are enshrined in those documents. And like the council, I know staff also intend to safeguard those rights for all community members, including Mr. Perez and the other HCAC members and the members of the public who have engaged with and participated in that process. With respect to transparency, everything that's on the council agenda is transparent. That includes the consent calendar items, and there is a mechanism, as has been exercised tonight, to give further discussion to consent calendar items by council members and by members of the public, and that has occurred consistent with the Brown Act and the city's commitment to transparent and participatory democracy. So those are the comments I wanted to add. Madam Mayor, if there are questions for me from the council, I'll be happy to address them. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing anybody raise a hand for a question of the city attorney, so thank you very much. I'll start off this conversation, and I want to recognize that I really hear a lot of emotion, especially from people in our community on both sides of this issue. So I don't want what I'm going to say to be interpreted as not paying attention to that. I recognize it, and in most cases, I have a sympathy for that emotion that has been raised. But our job here today is to take care of the business of moving our city to a better place where we can bring our community and our police into better alignment, so that all, as one person said, that all people are enjoying the same level of protection and representation in our city. And that has been my goal from the very first time I signed the mayor's pledge that sort of kicked off a lot of where we are right now. Through community actions and council action and staff action, to bring us to a time where we have set aside 6 meetings with a very skilled facilitator to bring this issue to a place where we can then take it to the next step. We have 4 more meetings left of that group. I want to see that group be able to behave and achieve at the highest level. And I think there are people on that group that can do that. I do not think this is a First Amendment issue. There are many people on that group that I have no idea where they stand on what their personal values are. But what I do want is I want to remove any impediment to that group moving forward in a very timely fashion and working at the highest level they can. And so, you know, it is in that spirit that I am going to be supporting item 3F. So if there's anybody else on the council who would like to speak, please raise your hand. And otherwise I will ask for a motion. I see that Councilmember Fisher has her hand up.
I'd just like to echo your comments and go ahead and make the motion to approve item number 3F, and that's abolishing a seat on the Ad Hoc Community Advisory Committee for very much the same reasons that you mentioned.
Thank you. And is there a second? Vice Mayor.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second, and we will have a roll call vote.
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
No.
McDonald,
Yes.
Posake.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-1, Healy voting no.
Okay, thank you. And to everybody who participated in this, thank you for your polite behavior. And I would really like to see our ad hoc committee go forward and get as much done as possible in your remaining meetings. So thank you. And now we're going to move on to the rest of our city agenda, which is new business. And we are moving on to item 4A, which is resolution approving allocation of housing in lieu and commercial development housing linkage funds to the Danco Group for the Meridian at Corona Station Affordable Housing Project located at 890 North McDowell Boulevard, and authorizing the city manager to sign documents for financing of the project. And we will hear from Heather Hines. And I see Vice Mayor Barnacle has his hand up.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll be recusing myself from this item tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Just going to share my screen. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Okay. So this project has been before the council on a number of occasions for a number of different reasons. So I'm going to give a brief overview just to refresh everyone's memory of what the project is. Meridian at Corona Station is a 131 unit residential project at 890 North McDowell. This includes 33 supportive housing units. It is 100% affordable and targeted at 20 to 50% of area median income. The project is evolving somewhat as we are going through the project process of incorporating public comment that we've received. I know that Chris Dart with Danco is going to go into a little more detail, but in general, some of the changes that we are seeing are creation of a public gathering area near the future smart station to allow a flexible public amenity, and also creation of a half-acre commercial pad for future development along North McDowell. And a public park concept on the city-owned parcel, currently a city-owned parcel, on the other side of the creek from this project. So, and throughout, this project has incorporated on-site supportive housing services. It has incorporated frontage improvements along both McDowell and Corona, and has included tenant amenities, and has met all of our asks and requirements for this is just briefly a modified concept. So you'll notice in previous renditions, this is the future parking for the smart station. And in previous versions, this came all the way down to North McDowell. This has now, in discussion with SMART and the city and Danco, it has been pulled away from the street somewhat, so that this could be a future commercial pad, and that is somewhat to address some of the comments that were heard during outreach. This is the area that is a kind of a community area, food truck options, farmers market, mobile clinic, some of those different kind of options here, a picnic area, and the bulk of the development has just shifted slightly. In terms of background, the council considered this project as part of a request for AB 2162, which has to do with streamlining review for supportive housing, affordable supportive housing projects, and the council did approve a resolution to that effect. So Danco has submitted an application under AB 2162. Staff has done the first 30-day review. Revisions are taking place, and we anticipate resubmittal actually later this week. Most recently, the council discussed this project in relationship to a partnership for a funding application for affordable housing and sustainable communities funding, and that was submitted in June last month for approximately $30 million, which includes $20 million for the affordable housing, a little over $8 million for the second smart station, and a crossing of McDowell for the pathway, and a little under $2 million for the city of Petaluma for some bike and ped and transit improvements in this area to contribute to this area becoming more pedestrian, bike, transit friendly. So the item before you tonight is a request for local funding for the Meridian at Corona Station project. In addition to the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities application, Danco is pursuing several other funding sources, which they will discuss in greater detail. They are requesting $2 million in local funding commitment from the city of Petaluma. The timing on this is to secure funding in advance of the close of escrow on the property in November, and also the secured local funding makes other funding applications more competitive for Danco. So staff looked at this funding request and recognizing the importance of this project in addressing many of the housing needs in Petaluma, working with our other service providers for transitioning individuals out of homelessness, providing those support services, and looked at our available local funding. So we identified two sources to meet this funding request. The first being our Housing in Lieu Fund. Our Housing in Lieu is a fee that is a component of the city's inclusionary housing program. Previously, it was an option for developers to pay an in lieu fee as opposed to providing on-site inclusionary housing. That has now changed with the adoption of our inclusionary housing ordinance in 2018. And now developments only pay into our Housing in Lieu Fund for fractional units, or if it's approved by council as part of alternative compliance. So the funds collected into this source are allocated at the city council's discretion to provide for low and very low income housing opportunities in Petaluma. We've recently used funds to provide assistance to Midpen for their approved project at 414 Petaluma Boulevard North, as well as PEP's project that is under construction on the Boulevard South. This fund has an approximate balance currently of $1.5 million, and it is being recommended that the council allocate that full balance to Danco for this request. To make up the other $500,000 that is being requested, we also have a commercial development housing linkage fund. This is also part of the city's inclusionary housing, but this is a payment that's required of non-residential projects in the city, recognizing that the demand that new commercial development creates So funds are collected based on the land use type and the square footage of new development. And those funds are collected and again allocated at the city council's discretion to implement adopted housing element and to fund for direct expenditures for the development of affordable housing. Most recently, funds out of this source of funding were used to assist Burbank Housing for rehabilitation efforts at the Old Elm Village project. And this fund has a current balance of approximately $787,000. So staff is recommending that the additional $500,000 in allocation to meet Danco's request come from this fund. Touching on environmental review, the Danco project itself under AB 2162 is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Additionally, this action is a resolution allocating funding and therefore is not considered a project under CEQA because the action doesn't in and of itself have the potential to result in a direct or indirect physical change in the environment. So in summary, it's recommended that the City Council approve a resolution allocating housing in lieu and commercial development housing linkage funds to the Danco Group for the Meridian at Corona Station housing project and authorizing the city manager to sign documents for financing of the project. Like I mentioned, Chris Dart with Danco is here and has a presentation, and then staff, including our housing manager, Karen Shimizu, we're here to answer questions at the conclusion of that presentation. And I will turn it
Thank you.
over to Mr. Dart.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. Can you see the slideshow?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Good evening, members of the City Council. Very grateful to be here in front of you all again. It's taken a lot of time and energy and effort to get to this place, and we're thrilled to be moving forward with this project that has so much public benefit. Last time we presented the project formally was in December 2020, and a lot has changed since then. But some things that haven't changed are the major project goals and objectives that we set out in the beginning of this process. And that is to maximize density to the sites. We have 131 units of affordable housing. 25% of those, as was spoken, was reserved for those who are in need of supportive services to stay in housing. 100% net zero design and construction, and the construction of the assisting in the construction of the new smart station and utilizing the housing project to leverage resources. So those project objectives and goals have been there and have not changed. But what has changed, the purchase contract was updated. The initial concept and was tied to the downtown project between the Hines, Lomas, and Smart. And Danco had originally only had site control of a portion of the property. That deal was not proceeding ahead, and so we had to renegotiate the contract with the property owner and now have site control of the entire site. And so the affordable housing project and the Danco project will be donating the portion of property to Smart to assist in getting the Smart station constructed. In addition to that, which I'll show you in a minute here, we reconfigured the site plan after hearing all of the public comments and having several public meetings. We reconfigured the site with really two major components. There's several changes, but the two major ones were a creation of a public gathering area adjacent to the future Smart station. And that's we were thinking of as a flexible public amenity space that can have events, food trucks, farmers market, really anything there that you could host events there. And then the modification to allow for a commercial space on the corner of Corona and North McDowell Boulevard. And I think those were the. Also, it was spoken by Heather that the smart parking lot was reconfigured to allow more efficiency, really. The original configuration of the parking lot was pretty inefficient when you got down in the weeds of it. And so now the parking lot's been changed to be a more efficient parking lot, and it allowed for more efficient use of the land by allowing commercial space. And then additional street trees along Corona were added to provide a buffer and shading. And then we started this concept talking about a public park, which would be adjacent to the city-owned property, including a pedestrian bridge over Corona Creek. That is evolving currently. And then many pedestrian connections between the housing project and the future SMART were identified and quantified for funding, and then increase bike parking, so name a few changes. And so here's a picture of the site plan. I know it was flashed on the screen during Heather's presentation, but really the green area, if you can see here, is the public use space that is closer to the platform, that the smart parcel could be utilized when in hours that it wasn't full. And so there's some synergies there. And then the creation of the commercial space of the pink below here on the corner of McDowell and Corona. And then this is the concept that we started discussing, which is far from over the discussions, but that there's the potential of using the city property and creating a public park that could be open to the public, but also funded as part of this project. And here's a few renderings. I think these were shown, and you've seen these in the past from the design. So in terms of the financing, one of the major funding sources for the project that the group applied for on June 8th is the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Community Grant application. It was assembled and submitted to HCD and the Strategic Growth Council for consideration. And I can't underscore what a significant accomplishment and very challenging coordination effort this was between the City of Petaluma, Danco, and SMART. Very complicated grant application that many people from those three organizations mentioned worked on for months to prepare. And we score very strong applications. We don't have any indication of whether or not we've won yet, since it's really recent, but we did score full points, and we will be going into the tiebreaker section. 20 million of that, as mentioned, would go towards the housing project and help leverage the tax credits. 8.4 million would go to help construct the SMART, and $1.6 million would go to the city for various infrastructure and transit amenity improvements in the surrounding neighborhood. So next is let's see, other financing that we'll be going after. We're actively working on procuring additional financing for this project. Our philosophy is to get a project ready, meaning get all the land use permits in place, any local support, leveraging dollars in place, and then prepare to submit any and all funding applications that become available to assist. This is a $70 million project. A big major portion of these funds comes from low-income housing tax credits, and those funds are competitive. And so part of that competition is to see other dollars in the project besides the tax credits. So if this approval was to happen tonight, it would be a big step towards leveraging those other dollars. And then there are many other HCD programs that the project will qualify for, and we intend to apply for all of them. In fact, we just submitted one today. The number 4 here is the infill infrastructure grant. We just submitted that application at 4:30 today for this project. So So we have others coming up, the multifamily housing program, the local housing trust fund, CDBG, and then an acquisition loan for the property. As I mentioned earlier, the purchase and sales agreement is in effect with Lomas with a closing date of November 30th, 2021. So we are currently preparing a 24-month acquisition loan with Century Housing. And then if the city's loan is an interim bridge financing, we need to get to the finish line and procure the remaining funds from the state. The timeline, we're going to complete the AB 2162, which is the final land use application with the city in this summer 2021. The IIG applications we submitted today. The awards on the HSC funding, the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities, are anticipated for October of this year. We have to close on the real estate at the end of November. We would apply for the tax credits, which is SIDLAC and TCAC, in February 2022. If we're to receive award of the first round of that, they awarded April 2022. We would procure building permits through April through October 2022 and start construction as early as November 2022. And we're anticipating a 2-year construction time frame, and then roughly 6 months of occupancy lease up to become stabilized. And I think that concludes my comments today. And I'm also joined here with my colleague Mackenzie Dibble, who's been project managing the project. And we're here to answer any questions. And thank you for your support of this project, and appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. And if I can get the full screen back, that would be helpful. Thank you very much. Okay, so I do see a hand up, and that's Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you. Quick question of staff. So when Danco sent the letter to us, asked for an interest rate of 3% and the terms, a number of years, but I don't see anything about that in the staff report. So could you clarify the financing for me?
Yes, and I'm going to actually ask Karen to address this. She's much more familiar with the nitty-gritty of those agreements.
Yes, good evening, Councilmember Fisher. It's pretty standard practice that within the city agreements, our financing terms are the 3% simple interest for a minimum of 55 years of affordability.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions, but I just want to say how much I support this project and appreciate the developer and Chris Dart for his work and hearing us and what we said at the council about the changes to the site plan that we were requesting and following through on that. It's really great to see.
Thank you very much. And Councilmember McDonald, followed by Councilmember Healy, and then Councilmember Posake.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just hugely in support of this. I mean, we have the money in the bank, the fees in the bank, and they do no good being in our bank rather than in actual housing. So I'm very excited about proceeding with this. And I do want to be sure that that the changes that get made get reviewed by the committees and commissions that for consistency with past recommendations. I realize the project's different, the rules are different, but nonetheless, showing back to the groups that have expressed their work effort on past projects would be greatly appreciated. I am concerned with the parking reconfigurations that the traffic report of how people get in and out of Smart Station be addressed. That it be a real functional parking lot and not have a landlocked problem, an all right turns problem, or something. That's all been considered. It'd be great to tell the public that at the committees and commissions that made those recommendations. Similarly with street trees, while, we need all the trees we can fit in places, they do impede vision, and I'm sure planning is checking that, but it would be a great opportunity to present to the public that we can blend both high density housing, trees that we need, and not impede access in and out of areas. I guess also on our list is we have encumbered money for other projects. PEP certainly drawing their funds now with their great progress in construction. But Mid-Penn, when do we expect that draw? That's a question for staff.
Karen, you are muted or something. I don't see your red microphone, but can't hear you.
Not now. You can't hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. All right. Great. Sorry about that technical difficulty. Actually, the funding that we allocated for Mid-Penn from the Housing in Lieu funds, that money was dispersed for the acquisition of the site that we closed on in June. And we are working, the other funding for them will be through the home program. And we are working with them. We actually have a meeting with that team and HCD later this week to talk about submitting that application. And those home funds that will be used for the Mid-Penn project are not competitive. They are funds from the home program income that are basically city funds. We just need to go through the application process.
And thank you. That's the Community Development Block Grant money that comes to Petaluma as an entitlement city. I was going to ask Chris separately when he mentioned those that outside funding source for CDBG home. Is that also is that Petaluma we're talking, or are we able to work with, the county and the CDC, or are you headed down that path for all possible dollars out there?
Yeah, we did apply to the CDC and the county for the CDBG and home.
Those countywide CDBG can be eligible for things that are in Petaluma too. What's one of the recent conversations at Continuum of Care is that cities are not precluded from using the countywide CDBG. So I hope we're headed down using theirs and ours as well. And did I catch this correctly that the permanent supportive housing is 25% of the project total? So that's about 33 permanent supportive housing units in there. And
that's correct.
That's just a big important feature to have. Permanent supportive is so important. Really good. We drilled down on what that number is. And the only other concern I have is this, we get so excited about thinking a project is happening, but thanks for being realistic about a 2025 as actual occupancy. Our housing issues will continue between now and then, and we need other tricks. We need everything Danco can bring, and we need other tricks as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember, and Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. So one comment and then two questions for staff. The comment is that I'm glad to see the commercial housing linkage fees being put to use. I put a lot of work into getting that adopted way back when, and it's good to see those funds actually getting used. We were one of the first jurisdictions in the area to do it. And then two questions for staff. First, I've been told that the big pile of dirt on the site is to be spread out over the site to raise it out of the floodplain. Can you confirm if that's accurate?
I can't definitively confirm that is accurate, but I recall there being discussion when there was, I wanted to say it was from Denman Reach, but I remember there being a discussion about excavation somewhere else, and instead of shipping, trucking it away, to truck it back in. But I will have to follow up on that.
But it's accurate that large parts of the site are currently in the 100-year floodplain?
There is an area that is in the 100-year floodplain, closer, I believe it's closer to the Corona McDowell area. There is an area that's in the floodplain.
Okay. And then, Heather, while I've got you here, I sent an email to you earlier today. And the question is, you know, we're being asked to put forth $2 million towards a $70 million project. And I hope that's successful, but that requires a lot of other pieces to fall into place in a positive manner. So is this an irrevocable commitment, or are we going to say, we'll put the money there for you for 3 years if you can get all your other funding lined up, or is our funding at risk if they are not able to actually get the other funding in place and we don't get anything for it?
Well, I think it's similar, and Karen, please, help me out on this one. I think it's similar to the Mid-Penn example where Mid-Penn used it to acquire the site. They in there, but there is then if the fees are used or the funds are used to acquire the site, then there are limitations in those documents that it has to be used then for affordable housing, or there's a backup plan to recapture those funds. Is that correct?
So
Karen?
I'm assuming the purchase price is way north of $2 million. Is that fair?
The purchase price is well more than $2 million. Yes.
Okay, so.
And if I could add to Heather's answer,
please,
Councilmember Healy, there's a lot of security a la the Mid-Penn agreement in terms of the permitted use, in terms of the city's, enforcement rights with respect to that. So there's very significant protections for the city to make sure.
So let's play that out a little bit further. Let's say Mid-Penn purchases the site with funds, including our $2 million. The other funding doesn't happen, at least not in any recent, cycle in the foreseeable future. We put our $2 million in. There are restrictions on the site, but how do we get affordable housing out of that going forward?
Well, there's project deadlines in the documents and remedies with respect to those, and so we'd have similar structure here.
Does that mean the city would gain ownership of the property at some point?
There is in the Mid-Penn documents there was an ownership remedies, one of the remedies, along with.
And is there one in these documents, or have those been drafted yet?
I don't believe these are drafted yet, but we'll be working with the same outside counsel team and using the same model documents that we did.
Okay, I just want to make sure our $2 million in affordable housing money actually gets used for affordable housing and it doesn't move sideways. Thank you.
Those are very important concerns that we'll be working on, and that'll be transparent to the council and also publicly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Posake.
Yeah, I just want to reaffirm my support for the project and to thank Chris Dart and Danco for continuing to pursue this project. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't see any other hands up, so I will open this up for public comment, and I will ask our city clerk if she's received any public comment.
Madam Mayor, we received one public comment prior to the meeting, which is posted with the agenda packet.
Thank you very much. So now we will open public comment, and we will ask our moderator to help us with that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in turn. You'll have 3 minutes in which to give your comments. And it looks like we have 2 hands raised currently. The first is Luke Lindenbush, followed by Taryn Obaid. Luke, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you, Patrick. Good evening, Mayor Barrett and Council.
My name is Luke Lindenbush, representing Generation Housing. Just here to reiterate our letter and strong support for Meridian at Corona Station and the staff recommendation for funding this project funding this project with $2 million this evening. Wanted to in particular thank the Danco team, Chris Dart and Mackenzie Dibble, for all of their work on this project. I think it'll be really important for Petaluma as a whole for the development of Corona Station, and will be mutually beneficial for getting Petaluma its second station and making sure that affordable housing is getting to Petalumans who need it most. So really just want to thank the Danco team. Also want to thank Heather Hines and Karen Shimizu in particular, city staff for making this go through as well. All of the work to bring this project forward. As Chris noted, this is really just the beginning, but this is an extremely exciting project, not just for Petaluma, but as was noted in going after those CDC funds, this is something that the entire county is looking at as a really important solution for preventing homelessness, preventing undue housing costs that are burdening low-income members of our community and those who are most burdened by the high cost of housing. So thank you so much for your consideration of this project and everybody for all of the work in getting it closer to the finish line.
Thank you for your comments, Luke. Next speaker is Taryn Obaid, followed by Susan Kirks. Taryn, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to make a couple of comments because I live a few blocks away from Old Elm Village. This project at Corona looks beautiful. I'm really appreciative, and I got to say again, thank you so much to Council Member or Vice Mayor Barnacle. This would not be happening. I just wanted to make that comment again, because that is true leadership that has gotten us here today, and everyone's worked so hard on it, and it looks beautiful. I wanted to make a comment about the trees. I know this is just a picture, but if you could make the trees as tall as possible, that would really be wonderful, rather than just the standard height of whatever, 25. I don't think you're going to have 25 feet. I don't think you're going to have power lines. No, but go for height, go for grand, go for things that poor kids looking out their windows can feel connected with and dream and watch the wind blow through them. Something that will touch their souls and they'll carry with them through their lives to make this a better world. That kind of magic really needs to be present. And I think I see that magic in your pictures. I just wanted to make that comment for as many trees as possible, as tall trees as possible. And then regarding Old Elm Village, I think it's about 15 years old, and yet they just did a complete gutting and redo of the interior and exterior of, I think, every single unit. I would hope that the materials selected for this project are very durable, so that down the road, we're not looking at our funds and thinking, do we have more money to contribute to redo all of these units inside and outside? Also, we provided funding of $2 million, I think it was a couple of years or so back for Old Elm Village, and we just kicked in some more. They cut down how many trees? I think at least 20 in the past year. I would hope that if we are contributing as a financing partner, we can maintain some sort of interest and investment and active partnership that keeps the level of this beautiful development as high as possible and doesn't get compromised down the road, either financially and turn into a money pit, or by eventually cutting down half of the trees as something like Old Elm Village. So thank you very much. Again, very beautiful, very glad this is happening. That's it. Good night.
Thank you for your comments, Taryn. Next speaker is Susan Kirks, followed by Ben Peters. Susan, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you. I raised my hand because I wanted to thank Brian Barnacle, and I hadn't heard any of the council members or the mayor say anything to that effect. And I was glad to hear Ms. Obaid precede me and say what I was thinking, because I think that being connected to history and being connected to how people approach leadership and the willingness to take a stand and to stay with that stand, and to have Generation H or Generation Housing also involved in this particular process. All of that combined are the foundation, or make the foundation for good future decisions for the city of Petaluma. So I particularly want to thank Brian Barnacle and acknowledge him, because as Ms. Obaid said, we would not be here at this stage, even though it's the beginning, if it were not for him. And also Danco Housing, you know, what an excellent, excellent partner and approach. Lastly, I'd like to say, just in briefly looking at the concept that, and Ms. Obaid talked about trees, this area of northern Petaluma is not one that's that familiar to people who are more focused on the downtown, Petaluma River downtown. This is an area that is an area for wildlife movement, but also when the environmental issues are considered, in addition to trees, the whole environment there needs to be reviewed, and the concept for a park, the high use, low impact design, which is the contemporary climate action ready type of design for park projects and open spaces. We need to consider all of this, because when you plant trees, that's also putting habitat into a housing location and housing development. So we need to have experienced people who understand all kinds of things about habitat, what types of trees to plant, what types of native plants to plant. Some lawns may even be appropriate, small areas for grass, because Petaluma is an area of grassland. So removing it removes habitat. We really need to think in new ways and in a new paradigm. And as I had referred earlier this evening, what happened at Paula Lane is the exact opposite, a 1960s kind of approach that should never, ever occur. So we need to be thinking about our environment while we're thinking about providing this great housing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Ben Peters, followed by Dwayne. Ben, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Yes, thanks. Couple comments and then a request. So based on the discussion of the purchase price for this particular lot and the implied escalated price, I just like to remind everyone how scandalous the downtown smart lot sale that was proposed. So I know, Dwayne, thank you for consistently bringing that commentary up. That was very scandalous if that transaction were to have culminated. I thank the transit gods every day that Mr. Mansourian is no longer going to be leading that agency, because hopefully we'll finally get a rail leadership that makes sense for Petaluma. Regarding the triple counting of alternative compliance at that site, we now have 2 proposed affordable housing projects that are much further along. And yet there's no need for our alternative compliance. And so I hope this double and triple counting and this fuzzy math regarding low-income housing never rears its ugly head again in Petaluma. I could go on about how bad that previous project does, but I'd like to just thank Mr. Dart and make a simple request. The people of Petaluma have been advocating for some new skate facilities for some time. And I'd like to ask you, Mr. Dart, please, in your conversations with the city, ask what kind of skate features or amenities could be included at that particular corner lot, and potentially even a new small skate park, or at the very least, some skater-friendly amenities. It would be great to to have people from around the North Bay go to the new Petaluma Smart Train station, go to that new skate park, go to that new convenience store, or whatever commercial use it will end up being, and have a great time in Petaluma. So again, I appreciate you, Mr. Dart, and I look forward to a great project. Thanks.
Thanks for your comments, Ben. Next speaker is Dwayne, followed by Sue. Dwayne, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you very much. I'm been very interested in the Corona Station pedestrian-oriented community for some years now, and I want to thank the Danco for addressing one of my three concerns, and that is they appear to have placed a small market there on the corner, although I don't know. I assume that will be a great addition to the local retirement community across the street there, as well as to the people moving into the around the station. The two things they didn't address, I don't think adequately, has been my main one was the concern for student access to the schools, walking to and from school, especially coming back after school, and access there along Corona. The path is bad enough for walking, thin enough, but for bicycles for a sixth grader or something, it just won't work. But they also have to cross the railroad track. I would have appreciated them building a retirement community here rather than a family-oriented producing probably 30 to 40 students getting across that railroad tracks twice a day. I'm also concerned with the traffic problem. I've yet to see a traffic engineer analysis of the current configuration. I don't see any place where people who are used to using the what they call kiss and ride, being one-car families dropping a person off to take SMART. The bus ramp should be located, the bus stop should be located near the ramp to get up to ride for people, especially to place it over there on McDowell rather than place it on Corona, I think is a major mistake. The access to get into the parking lot will be interesting, as let's see, one of the council members mentioned. I recall that originally SMART wanted 250 parking places and a two-story garage, and then they went to a one-story. Parking for 125. I'm not sure how many parking spaces are anticipated now, but access to them would seem to be a problem. I'd like to know how many spaces are anticipated, if somebody could be so kind as to answer that question. And other than that, thank everyone who has participated and offered their ideas, and thank you all very much.
Thank you for your comments, Dwayne. Next speaker is Sue, followed by Allie Gaylord. Sue, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Hi, thank you. I just want to thank the council and for Chris Dart and to see that this Meridian project is back on the table and going to happen. And I particularly appreciate the 25% of the units being supported housing. And that was it. Just thank you very much. I'm glad to see it happening.
Thank you for those comments, Sue. Next speaker is Allie Gaylord, followed by Jerry Wilkinson. Allie, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening. This is Allie Gaylord, Petaluma resident. Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, I wanted to thank you and city staff for your support of this affordable housing in Petaluma. It's particularly important to construct new affordable housing that also has a supportive component for residents, including supportive services to keep residents successfully housed. By constructing this high-density affordable housing, Petaluma will be moving in the right direction in meeting not only our regional housing needs assessment numbers, but also providing housing for our most vulnerable residents. I agree with Councilmember McDonald that 100% affordable housing is not the fastest solution to creating housing, but it is a quality solution, and it's a tool in the city's toolbox for making a long-term difference in affordability and housing access in the city. Thank you to Danco for proposing this project, and I look forward to seeing it completed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ally. Next speaker is Jerry Wilkinson, followed by Veronica O. Jerry, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening. This looks like a good project after so many iterations and some convoluted swaps in there as well. No doubt there are some kinks to still be worked out, as Dwayne has pointed out. But I want to give my thanks to the council and especially to the Danco group. I think this is, I think it looks good. The one issue that I see, I would just like to point out, I do not see at this point any bicycle lanes, and I hope that will be addressed as you move down the road. But other than that, it looks good, and thank you. I think it's a good job. Thank all of you. That's it.
Thank you for your comments, Jerry. Next speaker is Veronica O, which is currently our last speaker. Veronica, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening, council and community and staff. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who has worked so hard on this project. Originally, the fact that the general plan said that this was supposed to be a TOD with mixed use, I was very vocal about creating some active spaces in this project. And I'd just like to thank the developer for taking on those comments and integrating them into the plan and getting creative about what kind of amenities the residents can have. And I also like to thank staff for integrating this as well. And I'd like to invite the developer to continue the community outreach for some of the specifics that have been mentioned by the other speakers. And focusing on green spaces, food access, and community spaces. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Veronica. And that is the last hand raised, so I'll turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And with that, I will close public comment on this item and bring it back to the council. There was a question that I think actually deserves an answer, and that was what is the proposed number of parking places? Is it about the same as the original? Is it more? Is it less?
Madam Mayor, we were just trying to see if we could confirm that number. The parking area for SMART hasn't been fully designed yet. So that's one of the, I don't have a firm number. When it was reconfigured, it wasn't reconfigured to make it smaller necessarily, but to push it back from the front so there was the opportunity to have more of a urban edge and less of a surface parking lot edge along McDowell. So Chris, I'm not sure if you've been able to confirm how many parking spaces are.
We haven't, as you said, it hasn't fully been designed, but it's not less than what was there before. Yeah. There was some inefficiencies in the design. There was a drive aisle and it wasn't double loaded coming off of McDowell. And so it was just changed the size and shape to have less property, but the same amount or equal to or greater than parking spaces. But they haven't fully designed it yet. They just did a few layouts on it. But that's something that SMART will have to do as part of their overall design on the project.
Including, and we are, sorry, Chris.
Oh, I was just going to say, including, the appropriate traffic studies and safety design criteria to include as well.
Right, and in previous renditions, SMART was actually showing a driveway too close to the intersection. So that was one of the things that wasn't going to work anyway because of how close it was to the intersection. So allowed us to look at a reconfiguration. Just touching on a few of the other topics that came up in terms of bike and ped amenities, there's been a lot of focus on that in addition to like the tenant bike and ped amenities, looking at some of the grant funding that the city partnered with on the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities was to get bike lanes on Corona, fill gaps in sidewalks, get the sidewalk all the way. One of the things that part of this project, the sidewalk will be brought all the way to the rail crossing on Corona. It will be a separated Class 1 on McDowell, which was a request of the Bike and Ped Advisory Committee, as opposed to a Class 2 on McDowell and a sidewalk. So all of those things are going into the discussion and the tweaks and the reconsideration. One of the reasons we talked about trees on Corona was, in fact, to create a little nicer of a buffer for people walking on Corona than having the monolithic sidewalk and then the parking lot, to create some green and some softening similarly on McDowell. So those are definitely top considerations that we're talking about throughout this process.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm on. You know, I think that you heard a lot of positive things from those people who were able to speak tonight, and I think a lot of positive things on the part of the council, but now we need to hear from the council about the business in front of us. And so I'd like to see if there's anyone who's going to make a motion here. Please raise your hand. Council Member McDonald, and then Healy, and then Fisher.
Well, just that I'd very much like to move the item.
Okay, and then Council Member Healy.
Second.
Okay, and then I assume Council Member Fisher, you were up for that. Okay, good. Okay, so without any more discussion, we will have a roll call vote.
Barrett,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
McDonald,
Yes.
Kosake.
Yes.
Motion passes 5 to, no votes no. There's one recused, one absent.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we can invite Council Vice Mayor Barnacle back into the meeting and move on to item 4B, which is the introduction, first reading of an ordinance adopting the municipal code section 1712, electric vehicle charging stations, and creating procedures for an expedited permitting process for electric vehicles charging stations. And this will also be Heather Hines.
Good evening. No specific PowerPoint on this. It wasn't quite as, I didn't have beautiful renderings to put up for you on this item, but important items. So this item before you, Assembly Bill 1236, required jurisdictions with a population of under 200,000 to create procedures for expediting, streamlining permitting for electric vehicle charging stations. So that bill was part of an overall effort with the state to increase EV use, streamline permitting, to increase infrastructure, and encouraging the use of electrical vehicles and limiting barriers. So this was a requirement. The city is a little bit overdue in adopting this. So we're happy to be here tonight. And the ordinance before you is based on a model ordinance from the state. And really the requirement is threefold. It's that we create an administrative approval for EV charging stations that satisfy submittal requirements that we will outline in an application checklist. It's that we publish that application checklist on the city's website, and that we accept electronic application submittals and electronic signatures to reduce barriers. So simultaneously or concurrently with this item coming to council for hopefully first reading, second reading, and then the 30-day effective period, our staff in our building division are working on a checklist using the examples from other jurisdictions, examples from the state, to create that checklist and get everything ready for implementation of this ordinance. And the only other thing that I want to point out, there are a few contradicting references, Assembly bill versus Senate bill in the ordinance itself, so that should this ordinance be introduced by the council tonight when it returns for adoption at the next meeting, we will clean up those technical errors to make sure that they do correctly reference Assembly Bill throughout. I'm happy to answer any questions. Michael Whitaker and Charles Lucas from our building division are also here to answer any questions the council may have.
Okay, thank you. I see Councilmember Fisher has her hand up.
Yeah, a quick question, Heather. Do you have any idea what the anticipated time to process an application would be and what the cost to an applicant would be at this stage?
I do not. They are going to be, Charlie, I'm not sure if you can answer that. It's deemed, it's almost my understanding is it's very quick if you meet all the items on the checklist. Charlie, do you want to add to that?
Just briefly, let me mention that the permitting that we have been doing to date has been in accordance with the Assembly Bill, and our normal review times are in accordance with the expedited review. And so I believe it's a 30-day timeline, if I remember correctly, but we're exceeding that in our normal reviews. They're approximately 2 weeks to 3 weeks, which is about 10 to 15 business days of normal review time. And then I believe you also mentioned costs. I don't recall the costs. They will vary depending upon the size of the project. And so they're proportional to the size of the project, and the fees are normal fees like other permits of this type.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't have any other hands up. So if there's no discussion, I will ask our city clerk if she's received any public comment on this item.
Madam Mayor, no comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. And I will ask our moderator to see if there's anybody in the public who would like to speak, and we will open public comment on this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in turn. We currently have 2 hands raised. First is Chris JRN, followed by Ben Peters. So Chris, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thanks for that, Patrick. I found myself driving to San Francisco the other day and have an EV, and thanks to the city's lack of this permitting process, I've had great difficulty with my property owner approving an EV charger that I'd been trying to get installed under the provisions of Assembly Bill 1796, which allows for tenants to request EV chargers be installed at places where they live. Part of the processes, part of the difficulties cited by our property owner was not having a clearly defined permitting process for EV chargers. And so I'm very pleased that the city is going through a process to make it easier to get EV chargers installed on rental properties. That way I will be able to drive then every 3 days, as my current charger only allows me to charge my car over the course of 3 days, which is kind of ridiculous. One thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the text of Assembly Bill 1796, which is the bill that provides for EV charger installations in rented properties. It has a provision that only causes the bill to come into effect when there are 5 or more parking spaces in a given rental location. It would be a good idea if the city were to reduce that parking limit down to 1 or 2 parking spaces to increase the number of privately held electric vehicle chargers throughout the city, because currently our public electric vehicle charging facilities are lacking, and we need more in our private homes in order to increase EV adoption in the city. So I strongly support the passage of this streamlined permitting process and would encourage the city to do more for renters. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Chris. Next speaker is Ben Peters. Ben, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Yeah, just a couple thoughts on this. So as was mentioned by city staff, we're already in compliance with the spirit of this, if not the letter of the law. So we're actually not going to get any more chargers as a result of this action. So let's all just be clear about that. So a couple of the barriers that the city can hopefully include. So one is awareness. So when the city sends out its regular email touting the accomplishments, including the passage of this ordinance, please, please, please also redirect people to the Sonoma Clean Power Grid Savvy program so that they can get a very affordable level 2 charger, as well as the information on the Advanced Energy Center to find a qualified contractor and 0% financing. And so that knowledge is going to be much more impactful than the knowledge that the already streamlined permitting is now required to be streamlined. The second broader topic is more about zoning. And so the city needs to widen the ability of publicly available charging to be installed in any zoning district. Again, we need a lot more of these EV chargers, and so we need to open up the ability to install these things to all zoning types. That even includes somewhat controversial ideas where a homeowner could have a charging station so that their renters across the street who are driving to San Francisco could maybe use that charging. So under current zoning ordinance, that would be precluded even under the streamlined permit. So we need to open up our thinking. We need to be a little bit leading edge and actually open up our zoning as well as our streamlined permitting. So thanks.
Thank you for those comments, Ben. And that is the last hand raised. So Madam Mayor, it's back to you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will close public comment on this item, and I will bring it back to the council to see if there's any comment or if there's a motion. Council Member Fisher, followed by Vice Mayor Barnacle.
I'll go ahead and move the item.
Vice Mayor?
Second.
Okay, and hold on, we have a hand up by Council Member McDonald.
Thank you very much. I just did want to comment in here that a couple points. One is I appreciate staff's sense of priorities. I know this was a requirement earlier, but we have been knocking a lot of tasks out of the park from staff level, and this one being delayed was some, perhaps wise prioritization. Secondarily, the point made on renters is quite an important point. We do need that, and in any new development, the rental market, there's not enough in the parking lots that we do build new development on. And third, as a longtime electric car driver, a 220 outlet can often be really all you need, not a charging station. Keep an open mind, and though this conversation is about how we help convert, really, it's a very successful thing already we have in terms of getting people into electric cars. It's getting over their fear of a new world that is the burden.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, did you have your hand up for another reason? No, okay. So we have a motion by Council Member Fisher and a second by the Vice Mayor. And so with that, we will have a roll call vote.
Barrett?
Yes.
Barnacle?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Healy?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Hosake?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. And now we are on to a public hearing. And we have an introduction, first reading of an ordinance adopting a zoning text amendment to the implementing zoning ordinance, section 7.110, short-term vacation rentals, to eliminate the sunset clause. And once again, we have Heather Hines.
Good evening. So before you tonight, zoning text amendment, IZO section 7.110, which is our short-term vacation rentals. A little bit of background on this. The city first adopted short-term vacation rental regulations in 2015. And when that was done, in response to a lot of concern about impacts to residential neighborhoods, the city council adopted the ordinance at that time with a sunset clause that required coming back and reevaluating, and as kind of assurance that this new program that we were going to make sure it didn't change the character of our residential neighborhoods. So that initial sunset clause expired at the end of 2018, and it was brought back to the city council. At that time, city council modified the sunset clause to extend it through 2020. And so here we are now. Since the adoption of the short-term vacation rental permit program in 2015, we have had a total of 115 permits that have been issued. That does not mean we have 115 short-term vacation rentals, because the way the program is set up, each vacation rental permit is required to do an annual renewal. And this again was written into the program, so it allowed each year, if we have short-term vacation rentals that we have complaints about, or we have kind of ongoing enforcement issues, it gives us an opportunity to relook at them at the beginning of each year. So currently in 2021, we have 48 permitted 48 renewals were issued in 2021. And so that's the number of them we have in town currently. You do notice in 2018, you saw a big increase in the number of new permits, from about 10 each year to all of a sudden 54. That was partially in response to an enforcement effort. The city contracted with Host Compliance in 2017 to identify unpermitted short-term vacation rentals and do enforcement to get those to come in and get permits. So I do want to emphasize that while the short-term vacation rental regulations in the zoning ordinance include revocation process, we've never had to use that to revoke a permit or to deny renewal of a permit. We have been able to work whenever there is a conflict. We've typically been able to work through that with the owner of the short-term vacation rental. So as mentioned, at the end of 2020, the city received 48 renewal applications, which were approved on January 4th of 2021. Staff not realizing that sunset clause had taken effect. This is one of the issues just in terms of tracking these types of renewal requirements or sunset clauses in the zoning ordinance. No new short-term vacation rentals have been approved in 2021. So based on the fact that we've had minimal complaints about short-term vacation rentals and the relatively stable permit numbers, staff is recommending that the sunset clause be eliminated from IZO section 7.110M. This would allow the short-term vacation rental regulations to run as written until further modification or elimination through a subsequent zoning text amendment, instead of requiring that sunset clause to require review periodically. The short-term vacation rental continues to comply with general plan goals to expand tourism opportunities, support vibrancy of downtown by attracting new clientele, and it does collect transient occupancy tax revenues for the city. This item was brought before the Planning Commission, as is required for any zoning text amendment. There were no public comments at the Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission did approve a resolution recommending the City Council approve the zoning text amendment and eliminate the sunset clause. It was not a unanimous vote. Of the 5 commissioners present, there were 2 no votes based on concerns with the potential for overconcentration or impacts in the future as a result of the short-term vacation rental program. Staff did clarify that the program requires annual renewals to ensure that those impacts are addressed at the individual short-term vacation rental permit, and that would continue. Additionally, city always retains the options to revisit an ordinance at any time if there is concerns with impacts with that ordinance. Required findings for a zoning text amendment, required general plan consistency, which was found, the proposed ordinance was found consistent by the Planning Commission, and that's forwarded in the ordinance before the City Council. Additionally, findings of public convenience and necessity, and again, the Planning Commission made those findings, and those are included in the ordinance for your consideration. Environmental review, it was found that this was exempt from California Environmental Quality Act, and that the proposed amendment only eliminates the sunset clause and does not have the impact of causing a direct or indirect significant effect on the environment. So in conclusion, it is recommended that the City Council introduce an ordinance, adopt an ordinance approving a zoning text amendment to eliminate the sunset clause and continue the existing short-term vacation rental program as currently codified. And I am available for any questions that the council may have.
Thank you. I have a question, Heather. When you say we had 48 renewals, do renewals happen at one time in the year, or can they happen throughout the year?
They happen at one time. They have to submit their application before the end of the calendar year. And because of our permitting system, we can't actually approve them until after January 1, when the permit numbers go to the new year. So all 48 of them came in before the sunset clause. And then on the first day, it was January 4th, the first day, business day of the new year, they were all approved.
So if someone had wanted to renew their permit but just forgot, they would have to wait a year?
That is a good question. Usually I don't believe we've had that issue happen. So I think because if they didn't renew it, it would technically not be a valid permit anymore. And then they would have to apply for a new permit because they would have allowed their permit to expire.
And they could apply for that new permit at any time during the year?
Yes, you can apply for a new permit at any time during the year. It's just the renewals we do before we take that application in before that permit expires at the end of each calendar year.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that answer. I don't know. I don't see any hands up in the council, so I will go to public comment, and I will ask our clerk if she's received any public comment on this item.
Madam Mayor, no comments on this item.
Okay, so this is a public hearing, so we'll open the public hearing, and we will ask our moderator to see if there's anybody in attendance who would like to speak on this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the public wishing to speak on this public hearing item, please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in turn. We have a couple hands raised, so I will share my screen. Speakers so far are Chris and Karen Obaid. So Chris, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Council. Thank you, staff. Christopher Neugebauer here. I really want to take issue with how staff have chosen to frame this issue of short-term holiday rentals. This issue is not about noise complaints. It's not about people keeping yards messy. There's something far more important at hand here. We are in the middle of a housing crisis here in Petaluma. Rents are skyrocketing. I say that while on our block, when we moved here, we got a notice that there's a short-term holiday rental on our block. And it says that short-term holiday rental is only allowed to be occupied for 25% of the time. Now, if you do a bit of easy maths, you'll realize that that means that for the remaining 75% of the year, the house next door bedrooms, nobody can live here or live there because that permit gets renewed regularly. That short-term holiday rental is keeping a family from being able to live in Petaluma. I find it unconscionable that the city is interested in permanently implementing a program that will keep houses off the rental market for people who want to come here and live in Petaluma. So I would personally prefer to see the sunset clause extended and not removed. The city should regularly own their decisions to keep houses off the rental market. If you're going to remove a sunset clause, Consider instead amending the requirements for permitting. Implement a program that requires houses to be put on the open residential market once per year before they can renew their short-term holiday rental permits. That way, property owners can make money from their investments and people can actually have a place to live here. This was a 3-2 decision of the Planning Commission. This is a contentious issue. This shouldn't go straight through. It shouldn't be rubber stamped. Please thoroughly review the impacts of this before implementing it. Do what you can to keep rental properties on the market. Don't permanently commit this program as it stands to our zoning text. Don't lock houses out of the rental market. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you for your comments, Chris. Next speaker is Taryn Obaid. Taryn, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thank you. In thinking about this issue, I know some people that have units and they're not rented out very often. But pardon me, let me back up. Thinking about this issue, we have to, number one, do a cost benefit analysis. I'd like to know what's the income that we're getting from our hospitality tax on these units? What's the income we're getting from our permit fees? Is the shrinkage in permit renewals really a good indicator as to whether this is being managed well for in terms of financial responsibility for taxpayers? Is the audit being effective, the one that's just this kind of this algorithm that checks and cross-references locations? And I don't even think on Airbnb or Verbo, whatever it's called, that they even have a physical address. So how is that cross-referencing algorithm really working? So you got to do the cost-benefit analysis, and I don't see that there's rigor there. And I'm not convinced that our data quality is at all acceptable for us to ensure that we're doing right by our community. And in that cost benefit analysis, we have to evaluate, sure, it's nice for some homeowners to generate a little bit of pocket money by renting out a little unit in the back of their yard, perhaps. But those units, we talk about housing need all the time, and that being like one of our most critical problems. How is it that this is almost a social equity or social justice or whatever the correct term would be issue? How is it that we're keeping units off the market for vacationers who can afford $200 a night to go on vacation, while there are people that are, evidently people need houses to live in? And pardon me if I'm not well versed on it, but I do see a lot of empty units in people's backyard, but we're here going, Rena, build, 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 build. And it's not making sense to me. So I would encourage us to really make sure we're crossing our T's, dotting our I's, and doing cost benefit analysis like any business manager would. Profit and loss, right? So that's my comment tonight. I hope that maybe we can get a little bit more rigorous and specific in our thinking and keep the bigger picture in mind here. So the left hand knows what the right hand's doing and we're not just losing it all out in the wash. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you for those comments, Taryn. And that is the last hand up. So I'll turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. With that, we'll close the public hearing. And I see Heather has her hand up, so we will call on her.
I just want to respond to a couple of the items that I can. So we raise approximately $75,400 in revenues from our short-term vacation rentals each year. That was the estimate that finance gave us. The other thing I wanted to point out is that approximately of the 9 of them that are non-hosted, which means that nobody is on site. So most of the vacation rentals are either, a part of the house or an outbuilding on the property or something like that with the tenant actually on the site. So there are a slimmer portion of them that are rented at the expense of the whole house being vacant. The other thing I wanted to mention was a few years ago, and I want to say 2017, but I'm not sure that was around that time, when the state implemented significant reductions in our accessory dwelling unit regulations. There was a modification to our short-term vacation rental that said if you are going to get a permit for an accessory dwelling unit under all of these streamlining and no parking requirement and no impact fees, you can't then rent it as a short-term vacation rental. So that is something we check if somebody is proposing to get a short-term vacation rental permit on an ADU that they have built under the new regulations. That is not allowed. I think that's the things that off the top of my head I felt like were responses to the items that came up.
Thank you very much for those clarifications. Councilmember Healy.
Thank you. So Heather, refresh my memory, is the 25% cap, does that only apply to non-hosted units or does it apply to all of them?
I believe it's just the non-hosted. And while I agree that it is hard for any of us that have rented a Airbnb, you don't get the address until you book it, that kind of thing. But that is why we hired Host Compliance, and they do have algorithms that they're able to get on, and they're able to cross-reference, and they're able to verify some of those aspects of our ordinance.
So I know, thank you, and I know the reason we put the 25% cap in place was to try to encourage property owners to make their homes available for full-time renters and not go the Airbnb route. And it sounds like there's maybe less than a dozen of them, but is that still too many? And do you know what the best practice is in other areas for a percent, like our 25%?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I could find that out, but I'm not sure where others have landed with that. I do recall that, not specific to the items, to the houses sitting empty for some of the time, but I do remember when the city council initially did a short-term vacation rental, another aspect of that was it allowed some people to stay in their homes when they might not otherwise be able to, because it provided them with some extra income or allowed them to move into the smaller unit out back and rent out their house, some of those other things. So it's kind of the other side of the equation.
No, I was more focused on the non-hosted side of the equation. So I'm thinking this probably needs a more thorough review than what's on the agenda tonight. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember McDonald, followed by Hosike and Barnacle.
Thank you very much for the great presentation. Not many of us were on that council back at that time, but there sure are a lot of safeguards in it, and a lot of thought went into it for all the different competing interests in who would be doing this. And as much as I see as flaws in our society's decision making, not our city's decision making, I'm kind of comfortable with 40, 50, 60, especially if they're not full houses and they're not left vacant. I'm comfortable that's a good number. What concerns me is our trust in the enforcement, whether those algorithms are really telling the story. And so it's one of those, how do you have, I guess the question is how do you have confidence? Is there industry credibility on this? Is there other city corroboration that these algorithms are effective tools?
With the enforcement on it?
Well, I'm sorry, in capturing the actual market, to understand that they're not going through the algorithm and there's not 10 times this number in your city.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do recall that when we did hire Host Compliance, Ingrid and Economic Development led up looking at different options for that and interviewing different firms, and felt like Host Compliance had a really good track record. So I'm happy to follow up on that. I don't know it off the top of my head in terms of the algorithms they use for the enforcement or to, capture that.
Yeah, I like the idea of having industry confidence or other city confidence that we're doing the right thing here. So with that, I'd be knowing that we're chasing, and so at this point, after the first of the year, we're not permitting, we're not tracking. Is that correct?
We're not. We have several applications, and I think it's 4 or 5 applications that have been submitted for short-term vacation rentals that are pending until we had a decision on the sunset clause.
And we'll have, it would be our intent to have our enforcement contract continued.
Yes, it's still continued, and that's the plan. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Good.
Thank you. Councilmember Postcake?
I think I'm sure now, but I just wanted to ask, so we have had enforcement continuously since we started?
Correct. We hired that in 2017, and they do, I believe it's quarterly that they look at it.
Yeah, I would be in favor of considering some way to turn some of this into housing rentals, but I haven't read anything that leads me to believe we can actually get that done. That's my only comment.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
So in the council questions before the meeting, someone asked about, do we get information about the number of days that they're rented? And the answer was no. And I guess for me to feel comfortable in moving forward with something like this, I'd want to know that because we're not seeing the tourism revenue if we're not actually filling these places. And I just would want to, it's more than just the $75,000, right? Like what we really want is the tourism dollars if we're doing this. And if we don't know how many days they're being rented out, I don't know how many tourism dollars we're seeing, and if we're taking housing off the market, I'm just not. I want to make sure that we're seeing money coming in to the community for that. So that's more. That's more of a comment, but if you can address that or help me feel like we're like they're not sitting vacant for 75% of the time or something. I guess that's my concern.
So the non-hosted have limitations on how many nights a year they can be rented. The hosted do not have those same limitations. It's my understanding that Host Compliance does have a way that they're verifying that the amount that is being turned in with TOT is commensurate with what they are renting. But I can't speak to that off the top of my head. So, but that it is my understanding that is part of the enforcement that Host Compliance is looking at, is to make sure that we're getting, that they're paying TOT and that there's a reconciling generally with how much they are renting and how much they're turning in for their claiming for their taxes.
So the TOT is basically based on what Host Compliance is telling us. That's how we're generating their TOT dollars.
Well, no, the short-term vacation rental proprietor has to turn in their TOT. Host Compliance, my understanding of part of the enforcement is making sure that they're turning in their TOT because they report it to the state, and then the state, we get a piece of that. And so my understanding is that part of what Host Compliance does is they look at how much they're renting and how much they're claiming or we're getting from them. And so they're reconciling some of that. But I am admitting that I don't have the exact specifics of it off the top of my head. I'm sorry, Ingrid doesn't happen to be sitting in the audience here.
It's all right. I don't expect you to understand the algorithms. The other thing that you brought up was that there's limits on the non-hosted or on the hosted on the number of nights. And I'm just wondering what the rationale for that was.
No, on the non-hosted.
Got you. And can you tell me what the rationale was for that? I would think that if we had vacation rentals, we'd want to have them rented all the time.
I saw the mayor.
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in on this when it happened, which actually the fact that we're having so little input from the public is making me feel very secure in the checks and balances we put in place when we did this work. Because the big problem with Airbnb or vacation rental by owner at that time had been units that became party places. And, they thought they were renting it to a couple, and then all of a sudden there was a bachelor party or something for the whole weekend, and the neighbors just went crazy. So we really were very concerned that I originally wanted no non-hosted vacation rentals or short-term rentals, but we came to a compromise in which we limited it to 90 days, and that the host had to be able to respond to any issue called by a neighbor or the city within 1 hour. Because, if the neighbor lives in New Jersey, if the owner lives in New Jersey, it doesn't really help, or if there's some corporation. So the idea of neighborhood integrity and quality of living for the people buy these units was very important. And the other issue for me was that non-hosted units were exactly like one of our public speakers just said. They're taking housing units that could be lived in by people either through rent or by selling them off the market and affecting our lack of housing. So this really limited those incentives and favored the people who are looking to rent out a room while they're living in their home as a means of augmenting their income, or as Heather said, allowing them to stay in their home. So this looks to me like this has worked pretty well. The fact that less than 19% of the units that are currently renewed are non-hosted is a good percentage as far as I'm concerned. And, just taking off the sunset doesn't mean that we cannot review this at any time we want to. And it just means that we don't have to keep sunsetting it every couple of years. Which impacts staff. So I'm feeling that it's been pretty positive, and I'm actually going to be in support of this. But Heather, I don't know if you had any other comment you wanted to respond to the Vice Mayor on that.
No, I agree with that completely. This was a very robust program. We actually held a community workshop before we drafted this back in 2015 at the community center, because we had a lot of different concerns. There was a couple short-term vacation rentals in the community that were, causing neighborhood upset. And so kind of talking through those, but also hearing from people who were saying, I'm going to lose my house if I can't continue to rent out, a part. So it came from both sides of it. And so I agree with the mayor that there was a lot of thought and augmenting the code before it was adopted originally.
Okay. One more question, and then I have a comment. So on the TOT that we received, do we know, is it relatively equal across all of the permits that we have? Or are there certain permits that sit idle all year and we renew them each year, but they don't actually generate any TOT for us and they take the place off the market?
I don't know that. I don't
Okay.
have that. I'm guessing that Brian doesn't have that level of detail about it from finance department. It is not an automatic renewal. the short-term vacation rental owner does have to seek and submit a renewal application. So it's not something that's just automatic, but I don't know.
Right, but they would, going forward though, they would not have to renew if we pass this, right?
Oh, no, they still have to renew. All the regulations stay in place as they are. It's just not requiring every, year or two for us to come back to the Planning Commission, first reading, second reading. It's the process. We have a lot of priorities that the community and the council has asked us to focus on.
Got you. So my final comment is going to be something that probably is not going to set well with probably a majority of people in Petaluma, but it's not lost on me that part of the reason why we have a housing crisis is because we don't have a housing cycle. People are getting older, and my parents, my grandparents, they all live in the houses that they raised their kids in. It's a cultural thing. And if we turned over housing stock, and Prop 13 passed in part because retired people were seeing their cost of living, or they had fixed income and they couldn't afford to pay for their housing, but it really damaged our economy and made us rely on sales tax and development and all of that. And so while I'm sympathetic to people need a secondary source of income, I also like the idea of people moving on and creating a new place for a family to move in, because that to me is an unspoken piece of our problem, is that we don't have a housing cycle. And so I'll support it tonight, but I don't feel like we're doing it for the right reasons, and maybe I won't support it. I'm still undecided on this. It really it doesn't feel like it's the sort of progressive values that I hold around private property, and the idea that we should be turning things over and using the land to support our lifestyles, and not necessarily just own it until we die. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Councilmember Fisher.
I'm a little baffled by that statement. Sorry, Brian. Because I'm not sure where people would move on to, because we have this affordability crisis. But I'm going to go ahead and offer a motion, because as your Planning Commission liaison, I supported this at the Planning Commission level. And so I'm going to go ahead and suggest that we support the introduction of the ordinance adopting a zoning text amendment to the implementing zoning ordinance section to eliminate the sunset clause. Let's see if I can get a second.
Oh, well, you will, Councilmember McDonald.
And there's a second.
There's a second. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and without any further discussion, we will have a roll call vote.
Barrett,
Yes.
Barnacle,
Abstain.
Fisher,
Yes.
Healy,
No, and I hope the vice mayor realizes that an abstention is recorded as a yes.
I
McDonald,
didn't, but thank you.
Yes.
Kosike,
Yes.
motion passes
Okay.
5-1.
Okay, thank you. And, these are some of the complicated issues that we do have to deal with. It's not black and white. It's got a lot of shades of gray. So, and we appreciate the good discussion on this, and thank you, staff, for that as well. So that ends our business on tonight's meeting. So thanks to everybody, and we will see you next Monday on the 19th. So the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.